basically what you can do is that you can write custom code that will take some file, read it off the disk, do something to it, process it, and output it to the game in some other format. So what we're going to do here, and this is actually super awesome. I've got this really nice texture that, again, I found on the internet. I didn't even make this. I just found it on the internet. And over here, you'll notice two options: content importer and content processor. The content pipeline is, it's kind of a three-step process at build time. The importer is what reads it off the disk. The processor can usually convert or do something to that data. And then, there's another component that actually persists it to this binary format. But in this case, what one of the samples did is that they wrote something that will essentially generate for you what's called a sky dome. And it's this really great, just kind of visual trick that, you just tell it where your camera is and it'll draw the sky around you. So it's really great. And all you got to do is change the content processor to the sky processor. Maybe I hadn't built it yet. Let us compile. One of the great things about content processors is that, like I mentioned, they can convert from one format to another. So in this case, we're starting off as a texture, and we're going to end up as a model. Here we go, sky processor. That's the only change you have to make. And then there's a runtime component, which I'll show you here in a second. And then over here, you just say content load sky, and what did I call it? Dusk cloudy. And then again, sky, draw, and he takes a camera. How handy is that? So you run that. What the processor is actually going to do, like I mentioned while it's building, it's going to take that image. It's going to build it's going to build the model programmatically, just dynamically for you on your behalf. And look at that. Now we have a sky. We have a sunset. It's downright beautiful. So now the scene is looking a hell of a lot more interesting. There's really a lot more you can do, and one of the great things that a lot of people do is that they'll pick some subject that they really like. Like, for example, one thing that I've actually heard a lot of kind of game developers do is that they'll be driving around and maybe like it's a nice sunset like you just saw, and they're like, man, I wonder what it would take to render that. And they start thinking about how they can, render clouds, and then based on the position of the sun, they saturate the sky dome, and just, a bunch of different things, and they just kind of get obsessed with rendering a specific scene. And again, it all depends on what you want to do. A lot of people talk about, or a lot of people in the game industry, they talk about how, managed code is too slow, it has to be in C++. Well, again, the reality of it is that it's not slow. Sure, right now it has certain limitations when you start talking about floating point math, which of course in physics and a lot of stuff like that is very heavy. But there are improvements. I don't know if you guys saw Miguel de Icaza. He gave this awesome presentation on mono at the PDC, which you can actually just watch online on Channel 9 if I remember correctly. And one of the things he showed off is that in an upcoming version of the mono framework, you can actually use special vector types and like special float types, and it'll actually use the platform-specific vector multiplication units and all that stuff, and it's just as fast, if not faster, than some C++ code you might write. So, I mean, I haven't heard anything, but I imagine that the .NET, Microsoft's .NET team isn't looking at that being like, oh, that's nice, but nobody needs it. I imagine that they're working on the same thing as well, and maybe these guys just kind of got it out much quicker. So, I mean, really, these are just a few screenshots of some of the games. I have a few of the samples that I can, just kind of show off afterwards if we have time. But you can make some really nice looking games because a lot of the graphics, like, the various lighting effects and rendering a ton of models, you can actually offload a lot of that work to the graphics hardware, which, like, for example, on the Xbox is really powerful. And when you tell the graphics card to do something, the managed code just hands it off. And then the graphics card does it just as fast as if regular unmanaged code had asked it to do something. So, if you play your cards right, you can make really nice looking games, again, if that's what you're interested into. As of XNA Game Studio 3.0, you can now sell your games. And if you guys have never looked into this, the process is actually quite amazing. They've got a website, and of course, assuming you have this $100 a year subscription, you make your game, you upload it to the site. Other Creator Club members review it, so they can just kind of download it, test it, make sure it doesn't crash, make sure that things kind of make sense. They can give you feedback, and you might go back and forth. It's kind of like your own little free QA team. And then once it gets approved, it gets uploaded right to Xbox Live, and people that don't have Creators Club subscriptions can go, they can buy it. The developers get 70% of that revenue that you sell it for. If I remember correctly, you can sell it for either like $2.50, $5, or $10, or something like that. And for being up on Xbox Live, the developer does nothing. So one of the things they have this little catchphrase, democratizing game development, because with a lot of like the studios and stuff like that, it's a big business. It's a lot of money, and as you might imagine, whenever they embark on a new game project, it's pretty much, it's an investment for them, and they have to be assured that they're going to get a return on that investment. So what does that mean? That means you're going to get the next big game, the next big blockbuster game from these guys, but you're not, maybe one of you guys in the crowd right now has this amazing idea that no studio would ever fund, but if you can just get it out there and prove that it's going to be a good game, then doors might open up. Or, again, it doesn't have to be for commercial aims that you do this. It's perfectly great if you just are interested in rendering things and making, pretty scenes and stuff like that. But if you're interested in the commercial aspect, you can certainly do that as well. So, obviously, that has the potential to have a ton of great games. It also has the potential to have a lot of really crappy looking games. But it's funny because I actually, for this slide, I actually spent, maybe 30 minutes looking online, like, all right, what's a really crappy looking game that I kind of used to make this point? I couldn't find anything, so I just opened up, like, Microsoft Paint and started painting. Once I was done, I was like, man, actually, I think I'd like to play that game. But again, if that's something that interests me, I can start making that game and have, awesome stick figure fighting. But like I said, I really wanted to drive home the point that, this is easy. All things considered, there's a big learning curve to be sure, but once you start learning the fundamentals, this stuff transcends just this technology stack. Once you learn about game loops and about physics and how to move things with velocity and how to position models and how to move a camera around, that's stuff that you can take if you wanted to, and maybe get a game or a job with a game development studio working on a Nintendo Wii game, or even something maybe even more relevant. WPF has a 3D viewport control, and a lot of these concepts, when you look, you'll see has a camera, translations, rotations, scaling. All of these things immediately become relevant. It's like, oh, I know how to do that. So if you get a new job, hey, we do things in WPF. We need some new 3D chart. Hey, I know how to do that. So again, this is how, just by doing something that's fun, you can really start to grow your skills, and maybe even make some games or some money doing it. So, does anybody have any questions?
Do you know of anybody who's making money doing it online with the new, or is it too new?
I'll say this. Yes, there are games that are selling. This thing launched, it launched literally while PDC was going on. There are games that are selling really well. Microsoft hasn't released any of the numbers yet to the developers because I think it's like quarterly that they pay the creators people, and it hasn't been a quarter yet. So nobody really knows how much money they're making, but we know that people are making money. I also know that since XNA launched a few years ago, actually, there's already been one, now that you mention it, there's already been one game that actually went through the whole development process and the TCRs and the QA and everything with Microsoft, and they actually got an XNA game released on the regular Xbox Live Arcade. It's called Shizoid or something like that. And that game's written in XNA. It looks great, and they've made money. And that was like maybe like a 4-man studio, So yeah, people are making money. Any other questions?
What about like a model editor? Is there a model editor built into the XNA Studio?
There is not a model editor. XNA is, it's really just the runtime libraries and everything like that. XNA partnered with, and again, I'm going to completely forget the name. They partnered with a company, and there's actually a free editor that you can get, which I'm forgetting the name. If you email me, I will get the name for you. But there are free 3D editors that you can use, either the ones from the Microsoft partner, or there's another one called Blender 3D, which is free. And then a bunch of the other ones have like student versions that are relatively inexpensive. Hell, technically, you could even use like Microsoft Expression Blend Studio or whichever one to make a 3D model in XAML, and I'm pretty sure there's an importer somewhere. But once you have a 3D model defined in XAML, you can, assuming you have a XAML importer, you can import that model straight into the game. With, again, almost no work by the developer. Well, except the developer had to write the importer. But any other questions?
Oh, yeah. How about running that within a WinForm? Running XNA within a control.
You can absolutely do that. There's on the creators.xna.com site. There is and actually, that is actually a great site. So I will just very quickly. You guys want to visit that site right there. They actually have a sample which shows you how to get a graphics device up and rendering onto a panel. And then you can build all sorts of little widgets around it using regular WinForms. So there was another question back there.
There's a security issue with having the Xbox talk to the internet.
Yes.
So you can't just make a web request. You can't pull stuff in. How would you manage that?
Right. Well, on the Xbox, right? Like on Windows, you could do whatever you want. You could call it SOAP web service, anything. On Xbox, the Xbox Live Network, which is the only network that the Xbox is allowed to get on, is very tightly controlled. And the reason they do that is to avoid cheating. Understandably so. So you don't have any of the System.net APIs, web request or TCP, this and that. It's simply not in the framework that runs on the Xbox. So
games update pretty frequently. Whenever you play them again, you'll get a little message.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have something with Xbox Live, or
well, yeah, that is what's called a title update, you can actually do that. Like for example, if you publish a game on community on the community arcade, and maybe it gets through the play testing and everything with no bugs. But then once it's out there, somebody finds like a bad crash bug. You can fix it, re-upload it. It goes back through the peer review, make sure the bug is fixed. And then next time somebody launches, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure you can do this. It'll just do a title update and re-download. But again, that's all handled. Microsoft handles, that's all in the Xbox data centers. They handle all the network, all the traffic. They host your game so that Xboxes can download it and everything. So.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning towards the beginning that there was a way to debug the game on an Xbox while you still had your computer plugged into it. So you
Yeah.
can set breakpoints and whatnot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you do that for the Zoom?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You just take the Zune and it comes with that wire. You just plug it in, add it to the XNA device manager, and then in Visual Studio, I don't have any other projects. Well, but up here in the platforms, you just change it to like Zune, put a breakpoint here, and press F5, and it copies everything to the Zune, launches it, and then once it hits that breakpoint, the execution on the game stops. It comes back over here, and you can F10 and do everything. Thread view, local. I mean, everything that you can do in Visual Studio. So.
You actually get these 3D on the Zoom?
The Zune actually has no 3D. You're pretty much limited to the Sprite Batch API. But again, it's such a small device that
You said you hit F5, it downloads it to the Zoom.
Mhm.
Is there not an emulator in the development environment for the Zoom, or?
There is not. If you're going to make a Zune game, they're just going to assume that you're going to have a dev, just a little unit that you can use as a dev machine.
Are there good tutorials available online or anything from like the XNA website and whatnot?
There are about 1 million tutorials. They're all really good. Here,
Are they all up to date, like the latest for 2008?
for the most part, some of the samples haven't been updated to like Game Studio 3, but that's because when you launch it, it just like brings you to the Visual Studio project wizard, and you just press finish, and it just updates it for you. So if none of the APIs changed for that sample, like they just kind of left it, but they have a lot of really great content. I actually downloaded a few of the samples and kind of pre-built them for you, just to kind of show you. Okay, so in this sample, they actually have a shader that when you apply it to some 3D object, when you tell it, you can actually make it shatter. So for example, A. So you can actually do that to any 3D model with this shader. And essentially all it does is that given a time input, it operates on every individual triangle, individually, and just, makes it move out from, in the direction that it's facing and start spinning, and then it puts gravity on it. This is all happening on the video card. So it just breaks apart, it just shatters. Some of these other ones, this is actually my sample. I have an open source project, it's just called Scurvy Media. It basically lets you take AVI videos and render them as textures. So in this case, this is like, I don't even know where I got this video. I got it from a friend because I needed an AVI and I didn't have one. But all this is doing is using the Sprite Batch and rendering it to the size of the viewport. And this is video. You could basically take these textures and put them on the side of a house in a 3D world, or something like that. If you guys remember when all the latest consoles came out, the bloom effect was one that was really popular with game developers. It basically takes the light, and if there's any kind of really bright spot, it kind of blooms the light. So this is a sample showing you how to do that, and you can play with the settings. Like for example, you can make it soft, you can desaturate it, saturate it, you can make it blurry, you can put a subtle effect, and even when it's subtle, you can also turn it off so you can see the difference. So that's with no bloom, and you can see that like the edges are pretty hard. Even like where there's a shine, you can see the sky perfectly. When I turn it back on, you can see that it's the light actually and this it really contributes to a scene. And the great thing about this technique is that you can kind of apply it once to a scene in aggregate, and it'll just kind of make things light up. Of course, you don't want to overdo it, or else you get something like that. But these are just 4 of the samples. They have tons of them. If you're a premium, like if you actually have the Creators Club subscription, they actually have a few starter kits. Like for example, they have this one. It's called Robot Game. Very, very creative name. But it's basically you have this huge mech and you're running around blowing other mechs up. They have a has anybody here played Descent? Way back when, Descent. They have a game that's pretty much exactly like Descent, and you can get it. You can look at all the code. You can start adding content, changing the models, doing whatever you want to do, and make your own game like that. So yes, and that's just Microsoft. There's also a ton of other sites like ziggyware.com, for example, is a really good one, and just search for XNA tutorial all over the place.
How about AI frameworks that plug in?
AI frameworks, none come to mind. I know that they're, again, on the Microsoft site, they have a few kind of fuzzy logic. They have some. I wish I would have downloaded. They have one flocking demo where they essentially have a cat and some pictures of like mice, like computer mice, and the cat is moving around and the mice go away. So there are samples out there, and for the most part, you can AI is a pretty, as far as game development goes, it's a pretty general topic. So you can find a lot of literature on AI, especially game AI, and apply it to XNA. If anybody has any more questions, like I said, I love to talk about this stuff. So please just come up afterwards. I know we gotta run the raffle and everything. But thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel.